Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Fiber Broadband Association webinar. Today's webinar is titled, After Data Integration, What's Next for AI, presented by ETI. I'm Lisa Rosen, webinar producer at FBA. Let's go over a few housekeeping items before we begin. Please note that all participants are in listen-only mode. We will have a Q&A session following the presentation. Please ask your questions using the questions tool located in the lower left-hand corner of the screen below the video window. We also have several resources available in the related content tool located in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Also in the upper right-hand corner, you can find reactions if you want to share instant feedback with the presenters. This webinar will also be available on demand on the FBA website under the Events Webinars section. Finally, at the end of the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a brief survey. Please take a moment to respond, as your feedback is valuable and helps us to provide content that is relevant and valuable to you. With that, let's get started. Today, we are pleased to be joined by Jeff Boozer, Vice President, Broadband Strategy, ETI Software, Peter Cresse, President, Entropy Incorporated, and Don Eben, CEO of Core Consults. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. And hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Today's session is a follow-up to the webinar in November on how data is the key to AI success. Today, we're focused on AI readiness, other factors critical to AI success. As Lisa mentioned, joining us again today are Peter Cresse and Don Eben. Don, why don't you introduce yourself and what Core Consults does, please?
Yeah, hello. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for doing this. It's kind of fun to continue on in our pattern of continuing to grow this as we do it. So really what we see is most broadband providers struggle not because of strategy, but because of their systems, data, and execution and processes. So Core serves as a trusted advisor and guide across the organization, supporting the operational leaders and everyone to help align around the same priorities. We hope clean up and connect the tech stack from OSS, BSS to ERP and CRM, streamline construction and financial workflows, build reporting that we can trust, and most importantly, bring structure to execution, clear goals, and clear ownership. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Don. And Peter, your turn.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I'm president of Entropy, and we are a technology and business advisory firm. A lot of words to basically say we reach out and help organizations, vendors, ISPs with problems that they're facing in the area of their network, specifically on data, and these days about AI. So I'm excited to share some of those thoughts today.
Thanks, Peter. And as mentioned, I'm Jeff Boozer with ETI Software, and we're in the business of connecting the enterprise data across the broadband operator, including network, back office, and front office kinds of data. So with that, let's get started. Let's do a little current affairs to start off with. We were here in November, if I remember correctly, and we were talking about some of the things going on in AI. It's only 4 months later, but a lot has happened over the last 4 months. So first question out, guys, what do you think has been the most significant trend or topic that's become top of mind in the last 4 months? Peter, I'll start with you.
I think for me, obviously the big money trend is that the hyperscalers are spending billions of dollars to create data centers. But behind that and in front of that for the network is the word experience. I think what's happening now, there's a shift downstream to the subscriber to say, what is that experience? And so the 2026 word we're going to do is to say, how can we measure and use data to drive the word experience? And that's not just collecting information off of the gateway, it's also talking to the customers with conversational intelligence. So it's a huge trend, and each one of the major device manufacturers are leading with that. They're leading their strategy talking about the word experience. And we'll talk about that later as it relates to how the data supports it, but I think that's a huge trend right now.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think
good choice.
The other area I'd see. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Don. Go ahead. I was just going to ask. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think really the other thing I see kind of related to that is I think we all see AI continues to get better, and it continues to get better at a faster pace. So I don't know how much you guys have been following in terms of just Claude Code, Claude Desktop, Claude Skills. Those are examples of how it continues to get better and allow us to be able to take more action. So it gets beyond just the, hey, let me do a really fancy Google search. It gets into how do I actually bring data together, use these things, and start taking action across this. Has significantly picked up in pace, even in just the last month or two. It's kind of impressive what we already have and where we're going.
Interesting.
Yeah, just echo on that. That was my second point, and the models are significantly increasing in capability, and we're seeing that instead of just sort of what I call the retail model for Gen AI that we've experienced the past 2 years, there really has been acceleration of the model capability. So I think you're spot on, Don.
And just adding one other perspective to it, I think the one that I hear that strikes me in this scenario is the edge. How many people are now talking about moving the models and some of the compute, et cetera, closer to the end user because of experience, as Peter mentioned. There's a lot of talk about AI at the edge going on, and that has some impacts. I'm sure we'll pick up on it from there. So let's get to the meat of the program. Guys, how does an ISP know if they're ready for AI?
I'll jump in.
You want to start on that one, Don, or I'll jump in?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I think, first of all, if you haven't listened to our podcast from November, I'd highly recommend it to do that. But I'll summarize some of the stuff that we really had. So data is a big deal. It's probably the biggest deal. We were actually on just right before this, and Peter was talking about a recent article, which he can go into a little bit more. But getting data clean, getting it ready, getting it so it can feed it in, getting clean processes so that you know how you're going to run your business, so that you can apply those instructions or prompt to AI, so you can tell it what you want it to do, and then being able to get integrations together so you can actually give it access to all those things. Back to what I was talking about in terms of being able to take action. So you need to be able to have those foundational things in place to be able to start then layering AI on top of. I'm sure Peter, you got some more with that.
Yeah, I would say I'd focus hugely on workforce. Sometimes it's overworked in terms of people, but when I've talked to ISPs, the biggest thing is they grew from a team that was an IT-centric team to look at their network data, but to grow in the area of data integration and AI, they are struggling with talent to do that, to learn it, to grow, to change. And so workforce development for artificial intelligence and the data that drives it, it's a problem. And in our industry, just in general, McKinsey and other big companies are saying we're 300,000 people down just in general for AI capability, and there's going to be a huge shift into there. So the AI readiness means that the CEO or the owner of the ISP needs to take a hard look at what people he has, and not to replace, because you're going to need those people. What skill sets do they need to have? And that skill set is very, very far behind. And I want to say something positive. We're on an FBA podcast, but FBA is doing an education initiative, very much like OpticPath, where they'll be providing AI education to the fiber workforce. It's specific for domain. So I think the first readiness is to make an assessment of what do my people know? How do I either have to hire for that or add skills to the workforce? And we can delve in of what skills they're going to be, but AI is not like the old data that they put down. So my answer is really readiness is starting with the workforce that goes from there.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, I think that's a great point, Peter. Getting your team comfortable with playing with things and trying things. It's a little bit of the Wild West in AI right now, and we're not sure where it's going. We're not sure what the window is going to be. We're not sure where the endpoint is going to be. I don't think anybody really can say at this point. So the team has to be comfortable going in and trying different things. So one of the things we're working with our clients is identifying what we're calling AI champions. People that are coming in and willing to test things, see how it works, give feedback, evaluate some of that stuff, and just continuing to get adoption and trying it. It's going to make a big difference in the organization.
You know, a recent report last year came out with 90% of companies and ISPs are doing something with AI, but only about 10% are in production. It's sort of that ratio right now. So the question is, if you can't put something into production, should you get started? And I think the whole thing with an ISP is to get started on something specific and getting started with an IP champion and then picking a project that's palatable can really help. So you got to get started. The question is where. You feel that same way too, Don, as well? You got to get started.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to get started. Things are moving fast. You've got to be able to have people that are testing and trying it. And then to what you just said, then how do you start evaluating places that you can go, quick wins, and start planning for the future?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things I might add. You guys have talked on data and organization/skills. There's a few other things that are on the checklist, if you will, for AI readiness. One is technical infrastructure. It's no surprise that there's an awful lot of data going back and forth and shared around, as well as how in the situations where you may be working with end users or customers, or et cetera, that technical infrastructure is kind of ground zero, if you will, for getting some of this to go. I'll also mention government and our governance and ethics, something that I feel these two guys are probably better equipped to talk about than I. But the governance in these models is going to be highly important. And that's an area that needs to be addressed and looked at up front as well. So then I think use case definition, the strategy and execution around a use case being what you're using AI for. I think use case definition and the specifics around it are another thing that are highly important to success as we go forward with the AI. Pardon me. Next question, guys. Legacy systems, which I like this. It's often called the messy middle around the industry at the moment. Legacy systems are where AI gold is. We've heard this a number of times in different ways. But that's a difficult area to conquer, if you will. Does an ISP have to replace these systems in order to achieve AI access? Do they have any options? But Don, why don't you start?
Yeah. Or should I jump in here, or Don? Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll start. What I see is the legacy systems was an ecosystem of device manufacturer, the top three. And what was happening is we're taking telemetry off the devices, collecting it in sort of some sort of a support or marketing cloud, and saying, hey, we're managing our network through the telemetry from the box of what's happening down the network and the subscriber experience. What was missing is in the old OSS BSS world, now that that's changing, very much like what ETI is doing as an example, there needs to be some sort of management and organization in the middle, because now there's new silos of data. So I don't think you replace, I think there's a slow replacement as the new devices come in, and I think there needs to be a replacement and a rethinking of how you're going to manage and make things smaller and more efficient, so you're not running around chasing standards or things like that. So my key point is, what's the install base? And knowing that the three top manufacturers aren't going to do all of that work, how are you manage your network in what I call the messy middle? Some people call it orchestration. I call it data integration management, exactly what we're talking about. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I think Peter, you're right on. I think to roll off of that some too is the systems, as long as you can get to the data, you don't have to replace them. That's really the key. If you can't get to the data, then yeah, you probably have to do replacement. But if you can get to the data that are from those systems, you can start being able to integrate it like we're talking about and to be able to take action on it. Taking action on
what kind of data are you thinking about? What kind of, when you say get to the data, what kind of data are you thinking about?
Yeah, the data behind the legacy system. So what data is in the OSS BSS? What data is in the GIS system? What data is in the ERP system. How do you get to that data set, and then be able to take action on it and evaluate it? Because you're really looking for kind of, in my mind, two main things. These are very broad, but two main things. One is, what actions can you take to be able to make your team more efficient? So CSRs is a common one, so I'll use that one. So how do you help coaches CSR in real time, or how do you help give them more information so they can service your customer better? So you're taking information from the network, you're taking information from the billing system, you're taking information from the different systems to do that. The other one is knowledge workers. How do you give them more information and help them be able to see across multiple data sources they couldn't see before? So from the meeting notes, from the email, from information across your projects, how do you help them be able to see and analyze and understand data across that? So it's the AI gold is definitely found in that data. If you can get to the data, you don't have to replace the systems. It's really key just to be able to get it out.
Yeah, I want to jump in there and say you just said a great statement. The AI goal is where the data is. And so what I see for smart ISPs, they know that. They're saying, I'm grabbing the data. And by the way, that data is not shared with the general models. This is their enterprise data because they have to control privacy and security for their own network. And so as they get their network up from 10 to 20 to 30 to 50,000 subscribers, they're getting a lot of understanding. They can use that for two ways. They can have an efficiency of the network, but really I go back to the ultimate experience where you can basically now say, I know your experience in the home better than you do, Mr. Customer, and then they can use that data to win. I like to simply say, sometimes when I give AI talks, whoever controls the data wins. So the question is, what data? And I think you just described it. And it's not just telemetry box data, it's everything to gather those things together. So the next stage of what we're going to talk about is how do you learn on that data? How do you train those data sets? And then on AI, that's what AI is, training. And then how do you begin to do inference for decisions and actions? So whoever controls the data wins. I think that's the whole thing of what the legacy represents.
Great.
I might just add in a little bit here that one of the things that you see a number of companies doing now in various ways is treating integration management, the phrase you use, Peter, as a function of the IT architecture. And they're doing the integration management layer as a platform, if you will. So integration of all of that data, including an awful lot of the legacy data and legacy apps that are out there, in that data integration platform context, you can actually access that data in those systems even on a real-time basis and provide that into the models, et cetera, that are available or that you might be using. So thinking of integration as a strategic approach, not just a situational approach, is one way to abstract the legacy systems as you have and pull that data into the full enterprise model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right,
there's no question on that. Can I just speak to that real quick? Data integration historically was 15 years ago of integrating data from different formats. Today, data integration is doing two things. When we use that word in an AI realm, it really means bringing together unstructured data, data from different sources, devices, all the things we just talked about, and you're integrating them so you can learn from different dimensions. And then when you capture that in your own foundation or RAG-based data, then you can tap into that. And that's what we see, the new architectures. But it requires really the expertise to be able to manage that data in and out. So the IT people can do it about halfway because they can govern it and manage their data warehouses. But in this new AI world, the data integration requires expertise. And that's what Core and ETI do. They have that expertise to help ISPs along in that journey.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think one of the things historically, we limited ourselves to structured data in tables or Excel spreadsheets or that kind of thing, because that's what worked well AI expands that greatly. So don't just limit yourself to data thinking. It has to be in a table, or it has to be a structured format. AI can bring data across a lot of different places. And then Zach, you asked a question about models. Anthropic and OpenAI both released within 15 minutes of each other recently two pretty good models that do pretty impressive stuff. I don't know what model your CISO particularly approved there. And there are legitimate security concerns you have to think about to do that, but models are definitely increasing significantly and getting better at a faster pace.
Yeah, the models today, we're seeing there's about 150 generative AI models. We know the top 3 or 4 of OpenAI and Gemini and Claude. But there's about 30,000 inference models, which are the decisions downstream, which are much more specific. So when we talk about models, we're either using that on the front end to organize our data a little bit, but actually what's going to be growing as we look at more edge are the models that use the trained data to do actually things. And so we want to distinguish between the models. I think as we organize our data in the front end, it's more Gen AI models. And I myself, I'm a Gemini model person, but Claude is coming on so fast. And I see that ChatGPT is much more of a retail model. But any one of those 3, it will have their own value depending about how much thinking space they'll do for reflection. And I think that's the power of the model. It's not just the algorithm of the model, it's how they're structured to allow you to store a lot of historical data to do your thinking. That's the kind of the way the model works.
Yeah, and I think being able to then play with those different ones, and Zach, you're asking the right question, because different models are changing at different rates and are better at different things. So how do you play with it, but then integrate with the CISO to do it in a way that you're either sharing data and testing data that isn't that big a deal, it can be shared easily, or how do you do it in a secure way? But you're going to have to be able to play and test with different things based on what's happening going on, because it keeps changing in terms of what makes sense.
And you're not stuck with a model, because once you get your organized data in an organized way, you can ask another model and say, "Hey, check this out." And a lot of times, that's what's happened. You can have 2 different models give you 2 different variations of the same thing. So that's the data integration part of what we're talking about. What comes next is nobody's stuck on one model. They don't want to get stuck on a model. I mean, Don, in your company, you use different models for different things. Is that right? Or
Yeah, actually, I was going to go exactly. I think that's a great point, because we don't know where this is going. We don't know who's going to win. You don't want to build everything where if that model doesn't work, that you're stuck. You need to build it in a way that you can change models, that you can be able to adjust. So that means being smart about how you're building your data store, where it sits. You're building a knowledge base where it sits, so that you're relying on the model so you can do it. But if you change to a different model, you can do that fairly easily and not everything breaks. Is really important, because things are shifting.
and
You guys
sorry,
have
we're
touched
going
on a
back and
couple of
forth,
things
but
that. I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
I just want to add that the last bit is cost. So when you look at different models, they have, depending on what you're buying tokens and changing words into numbers and numbers into vector embeddings. That's how it works. And then you're chunking stuff down and saying, well, I'm going to drive it through. You got to say, how much does a token cost me, depending on where I'm hanging out. So at the end of the day, to me, it's a cost basis. The model will do something, but how much money do you have to train your model and then use it over and over and over again for inference? And you have to be very thought conscious. It's the prices are beginning to drop, but depending on how you're getting in. So you don't want to get sucked into a model that's super expensive to run. I think that's a big thing. You probably do ROI for the models and do what ifs with your customer to say how much is it going to cost them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Jeff, we're getting excited. We'll let you jump in.
That's all right, no problem. So you mentioned a couple of things in that exchange there that I'd like to follow up on. One of them is the data lake idea. So there's data lakes have been mentioned a couple of times so far. Why is a data lake not solve the total AI problem? Peter, you want to go first?
Sure.
Don,
I think
Don,
it
I think
depends
Don's
on.
going
Oh, sorry.
Don, why don't you
I
hit
missed that. Yeah. So I think it depends on the use case. So if you need real-time data or near real-time data, a data lake isn't the answer. Because the data lake is something where you're looking at something that's aged at 15 minutes or more, and usually a day or more is most of the time. If it's in a data lake, it's usually a day old or more. So based on your business case and what you need, if it's more of analysis, that kind of stuff, you probably can wait for stuff that's a day or a week old. If back to the CSR use case I was talking about earlier, ideally you want them to have data about what's going on with the client right then. What's happening as they're talking to the client with their internet speed right then or with their internet things right then. So you need to be able to get data access right then, and a data lake or a data store of any kind isn't going to be able to give you that. So you need to be able to have both is the short answer.
And I'd add to that is that I totally agree. So if you went on levels, if you will, sorry for the words, but it would be batch inference would be just your batch data, and then you can do that, and that comes out of a data lake or your stores. Then there's sort of semi-batch near real time. That could be like from a support rep of conversational intelligence. Maybe there's a little bit of lag, maybe 5-10 seconds. And then there's dynamic inference. That would be automated vehicles. In ISP networks today, I don't know if you're seeing it, Don, because I think batch and near real time is good enough right now for how the networks are working. In other words, if there's a small delay, but I don't know if you're seeing anything that is requiring hugely fast dynamic, like automated cars or vehicles. I don't know, what are you seeing from the ISPs today?
Yeah, no, it's usually not. No, it's not like a driving scenario like a Tesla or something like that. It's not requiring that kind of responsiveness. So you can do a little bit of batching, a little bit of something like that to be able to back to, again, I use the one because you want to know what the customer network's going on. The network devices themselves are pinging at some regular pace, right? Whatever you set up there, what's going on. So you can then ping and come back and then do it, or send a ping based on trigger a ping based on what's going on there. So there is some delay in there, but it needs to be pretty quick to be able to do it. So.
Yeah, and I'll just add that autonomous network or network automation is where real-time data is necessary for sure. There's other processes and functions in the business that as we get to more intent type of AI, we're going to need more and more real-time data. And the data lake doesn't do real-time data. As you mentioned, it's at least a little historical by a few minutes, if nothing else. Data lakes are an interim step and may solve a number of those problems for a longer period of time. But as we move well into the area of intent, we have to have real-time data flowing through that. And then there's that comes down to data streaming is what we're really talking about. And data streaming is going to be at least from what we're seeing, especially in the network world, is going to be a requirement.
Yeah, I add to that is that for the data streaming and the fiber is being laid down as we speak in a dramatic way for the next 5 years to allow edge and streaming closer to the subscriber and user or use case. So that's exciting. But I want to go back to this data lake in inference and intent. If we start with generative AI, which trains the model, and then we move downstream, once the model's trained, we go to inference model, which is just feeding off of the trained data that you're getting from the boxes, the devices, or people. But you mentioned a big thing about intent, which is, well, what's the context? What's the semantic meaning behind what someone wants to do or the network has historically done? That requires a huge amount of understanding. And those systems are being put down today. Some people, when you look at call centers, they talk about conversational intelligence to do that, but it's a lot more than that. There's a funny thing that says context is everything. If you take the 3 words, let's eat grandma or let's eat grandma, that's funny. Remember that, but that is really semantic and intelligent. And that's what networks have to begin to understand is when you get real understanding back from your customer or your network, remember that feeds into your model. Every piece of data you're getting back. So I think intent and inference are going to be the future as we push towards the edge.
I think to that point, one of the things I think is important is starting to train your organization on what is AI. It's used so broadly, it can mean a lot of different things. And then how do you use it well? I mean, Peter's bringing out some great point in terms of doing intent. So instead of just doing a very simple search of help me do this, how do you interact with it like you would like a new person coming into your company, or like your coworker that you're trying to help train up? They have a lot of experience, but you're trying to give them additional context so that they can give you a better answer. Thinking of it that way, helping do that way significantly improves the results, and going back and forth with it. So helping to take that intent that you're trying to do improves the inference, improves the responses, improves all that stuff. So how do you start training the organization as they think and interact with it differently than they have a Google search or other tools, because its capabilities are so much beyond what that was.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question, Don, on that is, I was at a conference last week, a major ISP conference, and as I walked around, the number one thing I was getting for the executives and people there, they said, AI, I don't get it. I said, how can you not get something that's transformational for mankind? And the answer is, well, the real question they're asking is, where do I start?
Mm-hmm.
And so, Don, where do you think people should start for their understanding of AI? I know where I started. I just started with the data because that's what I knew. But where does someone really get started when they're on that journey?
Yeah, I think getting somebody who has experience that can help guide you and walk you through that is a big deal. They can start helping you think through, how do you jump past. I mean, you can learn it yourself, obviously, if you want to do that. But if you want to jump past that, get somebody and say, okay, they're down the road. How can they help you think through how you better interact with AI, how you better understand what the AI tools are, the opportunities are, what you can do with that, so that they can really see and unlock the potential that's there. I remember when I was first starting with AI, sometimes I wouldn't even try something because I thought it couldn't do it, and then I'd try it and I'd be surprised. It did it better than I thought it was going to do it. It still may have problems, but it did it better than I thought it was going to do it. So I think the other thing too is just be willing to try things. There's going to be a lot of trying things and going through and doing things and seeing how it works. Now, I keep coming back to the question early on in terms of CISO. It's got to be in a way that works within your company and the guidelines that you have, but creating that kind of R&D thought process type piece is important.
Yeah. So let's go down this path a little bit more. Actually, you guys have talked around this a little bit. Let's talk. Let's give some insights to the audience on what they should be looking at when we're looking at an LLM or SLMs, as we've talked about before, small learning models. What should you be looking for, and what does it take to create an effective learning model?
I mean, in the first place, we keep going back to the data, but the first thing is what data sets are you learning at? I want to make a point, and that is that we historically would grab data assets and call that big data, and we thought that was data is the new oil, we used to say 10 years ago. But now we're basically looking at data insofar as that feeds AI or learning. So you have to basically start and say, what data sets do I want to learn against? And obviously you want to learn against what your network is telling you. That's a good place to start. So I think the first place to do that and look at that. Now, the reason why that's important is that's going to give the indication of kind of what you want to try to do with your model. Do you just want to shape what you have for log data, which is saves a lot of time? That might be just all you want to do of a Gen AI. Or do you want to move downstream for decision makings to say on automation, if something is an alarm comes, then do something. So you have to distinguish your models. And so what's going to happen is the LLMs are going to be so big and untenable, because those are big built for retail. We're going to move to very bespoke custom models. Again, the growth of the models, we're at 150 Gen AI models with 30,000 inference models. And those inference models are very, very small of what they do. And that's where the value is. Once you get your LLMs built, your small language models are even smaller than that, and that's the way the model generation is going. So in summary, the bottom line is sort what data you want to know, pick your model, and figure out what your outcome is. Either you're creating something or doing a decision.
And I'd say just get started. Pick one.
Just get started.
And just get started with something, right? It's not important to get the perfect answer. There is not a perfect answer right now. So pick something that you can just get started with, start testing what you can do, and then learn more as you go. Hey, this particular LLM works well for me, or this particular small language model works well for me. But there's so many of them and they're changing so fast, they're just getting better. So they're the worst they're going to be right now. So test and see where they are, and then test again in a month or two based on what's going on. And that it may depend on your use case and your ROI, but be testing it.
And where would you test? Would you test your network for predictive maintenance? That's an easy place to start, to say, hey, what's my predictive maintenance? Moving away from machine learning. We're not talking here about machine learning. We're going to the next step of the AI. Is that where you might start?
Yeah, really. I think the broad answer is, where are the pain points in your company? So it's going back to assuming that you did what we talked about in kind of our first one. If you have well-defined processes, you're going to have well-defined gaps out of that. You're going to see, hey, this piece here, we can go try and do automation. This piece here, we have an opportunity to go after, and prioritize that and say, here's what we can go after. So if it's the network piece that your particular company needs to go after, then yes. And then identify few specific use cases that you're going to test and try. Have some road bumps, but you got to get in and try and learn as you go along and try and do that, and then continue to work through and try and do, and I'm calling it automation on purpose. AI may or may not be the answer. AI along with other tools is probably the answer, but what does that look like? How do you work on automation and improve your efficiency?
So we're having a lot of conversation about the implication of the... Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, okay. So we're talking a lot about choosing the learning models, or how to go about the learning models. Let's talk a little bit about what's the use case, or how do I pick a use case, the best use case to focus on for an AI project right now? What should I be considering? I know we've touched on some of this. Let's pull it into that topic. Peter, you want to go?
Yeah, I think the historical way that machine learning was done for use cases still is very good and valid. So when you look at AdTrans Mosaic or Calyx Cloud or Nokia Cloud, Apator, those are actually really well organized. And the way they organize them is either for provisioning, support, care, and marketing. Those are the four buckets. And so you basically have to say, well, which bucket do I want to optimize? And because that data is being collected, and it's on your cloud, and you're paying a software fee for that. So I think the most attractive one, in like number 1 and 2, is actually support for network predictive maintenance. It's very high value, easy to do. You're getting accurate telemetry from your box, and you can basically learn about your network. And the one that's coming on incredibly strong is what I talked about, experience and marketing. The ability to talk to your customer and listen, and upsell them services or other tiers, because ISPs don't want to just be selling throughput or even just latency. So those are the 2 use cases I would focus on, and we can drill down on specifically area. I don't know, Don, what are you seeing for use cases you think are doable and get started?
Yeah, I think those are some good ones. I think some other ones that are doable is the one I keep referring to as CSRs, helping with the CSRs and giving them more information so they can better react to the customer, which I think goes along with your experience statement. I think reporting and analysis. So there has historically been a bottleneck in organizations you have to wait on either the IT organization or the report writer or whatever to do the reports to give you visibility into what's going on in your company. If you can do the data we've talked about and get it in a place that you can use it, you can unlock and be able to then create and start asking questions of that data in a way that doesn't require the report writer to go do this. You can now start giving access to your executives or to key people. Hey, I want to ask questions about where things are at, and it can look across multiple pieces. It can take a look at where's my construction along with where's my sales. They can start looking across different pieces and give them better information that they can actually start taking action on and being able to get visibility that was unusual or hard to get to before.
And it depends on we're not just talking about ISPs, but there's a whole support infrastructure of support and services out there. I talked to someone last week at the show, and what's their biggest thing that it takes them hours and days to do? It's looking at railroad crossings, very difficult as they do their fiber mapping design. I said, is that difficult? They said, well, it's not difficult to know where they are. It's difficult to know what permitting is, and the permitting for railroad crossings might take 3 to 6 months. So you have to identify it, and then you have to dip in to another data set to say, where are we with the permitting to go in and out of the railroad crossing? So there's gaps that block things very quickly for design. And it's not just a map of an Esri map anymore. There really has to be thoughtful design. And the thing about AI is it's not feeding a dashboard. I don't want to say dashboards are quite dead, but they're dying. It's to be able to prompt and ask your data sets any question that you want under your terms and say, give it to me in this format. That's the exciting thing. So it puts the control back on the business person or the user to say, I want to ask my data a question. And it could be 2 disparate data sets. What's the availability of fiber? And where do I need this type of fiber? Is it long haul, short haul? And then what should I do for inventory and give me a cost? You can ask all that in one thing, and it's going to go to 4 different data sets and save a tremendous amount of time in design and construction.
Yeah,
it's just an idea for use case, but design is a big thing.
Yeah, and I think tying in, Peter, where you started with the workforce piece early on, if you can link somebody that's technical in the organization, probably in your IT organization, that has the skill set to understand AI, that understands that piece, and link them with people like what Peter's talking about. Those are the users. Those are the ones who are saying, I'm struggling with this thing, whatever that is. In this case, they're struggling to be able to identify the gap and then identify the railroad crossing and then see what the issue is with the permitting. Those are the gaps that you're looking for in your processes from your users. And you want to pair that with a person who understands the automation. That's where the magic happens, where you can start saying, here's an issue. Now here's somebody who can solve it. How do you start testing that, putting that together?
So to summarize what you guys were just saying, I heard 3 things. And I'm obviously sort of summarizing at a high level, but you're implying we should be looking and using at domain-specific models, in particular here, in that you need to be looking at a use case where there's significant automation, and you need to be looking at a use case where there are easy to measure metrics, KPIs, results, or outcomes. Agree? Or is that some guidelines for our audience to pay attention to?
I'll let Don start on that one, but I have a comment as well.
Yeah, so I don't think it needs to be a domain-specific model yet. I think you just start with something first and then work your way down to find what's right. I do agree it needs to be something you feel like you can automate to do that. And then so basically those 2, yes, I agree with in terms of here's kind of some guidelines to you can go through and do that. So, yeah.
Peter?
I mean, the ROI that I've seen is there's 2 realms. The ROI coming from support reps and CSRs is about a 20% savings. You're just saving time because you're capturing conversation or capturing anything that's happening, and that's transcribed automatically. It's just what people do. So that's a great, easy to implement and quick to implement off of a VoIP system or something like that. But I see a huge trend coming from the device manufacturers taking telemetry from the devices to make it effortless to get that telemetry back and say, hey, this is what's happening. We already know what's happening. And by the way, if the device isn't performing, they can actually go to bends in the network and work with OTDR information about the optical frequencies. But the real thing is that we're capturing of the metric that they want to capture is what's happening at the gateway. The network works generally. Really what's coming soon is capturing all that understanding from metrics at the gateway. Because if the gateway is down, for whatever reason, your customer's not getting his service. And so I think those are the 2 metrics that we would use. So it's not just on or off for the network, it's the performance of the network. And there's always these sticky nodes, or when the weather drops below 30 degrees or something, that it seems that certain aspects of the network don't work really well, certain work robustly, generally dependent on distance of networks. And then in stuff in the ground versus aerial also has their own considerations of it gets real skittish. Aerial can get really, really difficult on a fiber network. So yeah, metrics and people.
All right. We're getting near the end of our time here today, so let's close out with one question. What is one piece of wisdom around AI that you guys have experienced, learned, heard, whatever, that you would want to pass along to the audience today? Don, I'll start with you.
I'd say you've got to be curious and you've got to be flexible. You've got to continue to be curious about what's happening, about where things are going, what's going on, trying to see what's going on, and you've got to be flexible. We don't know where it's going. We don't know the end. So you've got to be able to do it based on, hey, this is what's happening now, and how do I adjust as I go along?
Peter?
Mine dovetails with that. I would say AI is relatively, it's a relative truth. It's never 100% accurate, never. And so you have to be comfortable with what is good enough for your network and what actually doesn't work. And that gets into privacy and concerns and things. But you really have to understand to how far does it go up? Does it go up to 90% surety or whatever? Because the model is just a predictor of the next work. That's a transformer model, generally. So that my wisdom is check your assumptions and then check, is it good enough? There used to be an expression, better is the enemy of good enough. Sometimes good enough's okay. And then we're in that time. And I totally agree. We don't know where it's going because of what's happening with the models and things like that. So be curious and get started today. That's what I would do.
I think I'll add one that I don't think anybody's mentioned so far, but that is, don't try to do this in the beginning by yourself. Get some help. The success rates for AI projects today are way higher if you're working with someone, a partner, a vendor, whatever, who has some skills while you develop your own skills. Have a partner. Don't do it by yourself. That's mine. All right, we're getting near the end of the time, so I think we'll wrap up at this point. Thank you, Peter and Don. Appreciate the insights and all the expertise. I'll handle it back over at this point.
Great. To learn about upcoming FBA webinars, please scan the QR code on your screen or navigate to the events section for the FBA website. We hope everyone will join us for our Fiber for Breakfast webinar series featuring FBA President and CEO Gary Bolton. These are live events every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. And past episodes are available on YouTube and SoundCloud. Thank you to our presenters, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you.